All right, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, Lisa. Welcome. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Muslim Women's Organization. I just want to say, woo, like, Jazakallah khair. Just know that the Muslim Women's Organization, myself, everybody, we see you, Lisa. And all I can think about every single time I see the little notification of you going live or you posting that, I pray to Allah that you're protecting your peace as much as possible and that you're able to find joy even in this work, right? Because you're doing so much for so many survivors. So I just want to start off by saying, what are you doing to find joy for yourself in these times? And these conversations are hard, they're heavy. And what do you do to take care of yourself as you're even navigating through that?
I think what gives me strength is seeing women and their journeys and them getting out of their abusive relationship. And that's what keeps me going. I hear from women every day, and it is very mentally draining because you're reliving your own experiences every single time you hear from another victim or survivor. But what gives me strength is that seeing other women going through journeys and getting out themselves. There's actually two women in Florida who I think you even spoke, obviously we'll keep her privacy, but you even spoke with her as well. And alhamdulillah, mashallah, she's out and she's survived. You're muted a little bit, so I don't know if
I just alhamdulillah, and just to protect her and not to reveal too much at all. But I remember being in that Google Doc and she was on the phone with us, but she was too afraid to share over the phone.
Say her story. So she had a code word on the Google Doc that she needs help right at that moment. These are the things that people don't realize what a victim goes through and how much fear they have because if people always say why don't you just leave? That's when they're most in danger, when they try to seek help and when they try to leave, their life is on the line. So they will use code words or sign language or anything that's going to notify somebody that they need help, because they can't just, if they could just up and leave, then a lot of women would be able to get out. But unfortunately, their life is on the line.
Absolutely. And I just remember it was so many layers, just being in that Google Doc, being with you and being like,
how do we help her?
How do we help her? Right? Because survivors have to come at their own pace on what they understand is best for them. And it is a very scary process. So I just wanted to, that what you just shared is exactly what I thought, is just being able to understand others' stories and how they've been able to really reclaim their joy that someone tried to take away from them. And it's kind of like, no, absolutely not. I'm not going to allow that person. And on that note, just women that don't have that support or resource to leave. So kind of just give us your story and, so I know that but the Muslim Organization's Violence Against Women Task Force has been able to be that source for people to be able to come for support, but we are able to provide the resources so that we can help the best of ability, right? As far as these are the resources, these are the options, and being some kind of support. So Lisa, if you can take us back and, if at any time you feel it's too hard, right? Because you've been doing this so much. And I imagine sometimes it's go, go, go. And sometimes it's, I can't, right? So, but just if you are able to take us back to, what you would like and willing to share about your survivor story and how it's translated into helping other survivor stories.
I knew I was going to get emotional with you because like obviously we have a very personal relationship. You know, we have the organizations that we work in, but you were my first call. And I do so many lives, and I talk about it a lot, and it gets almost like technical, almost like this happened, this, you know what I mean? Like but when you really tap into the emotions.
And I think that's the big part, is that these emotions we're still healing through no matter how many years pass.
Well, I think it's all, I think it's not that it's you haven't healed or I haven't healed. Right. It's that, you know, people are always going to be different after they've gone through abuse, but that doesn't mean that you can't be happy and thriving and find your identity again. You know what I mean? Like you can have all that and you can even be stronger, but there's always going to be a sense of I've been changed, you know? I'm just not going to allow it to control me. You were the first call I made, and a lot, my business partner knew, her husband knew, his family knew, you know, sheikhs and, you know, at the local mosque, I had reached out to so many, you know, but I kept it private from my family. Even when I made the call to you, my family still didn't know. I was still afraid to come out to them. So I called, you know, people that I'd known for years in the Orlando community, because that's where I lived before when I had gotten married to him. So I felt that that was just my safe space, you know, even though my family's, mashallah, so supportive. I was just in the, you know, I was in so much trauma that I was afraid to speak out. And so I called you, and you immediately called Arthur. I've kept his name private for, you know, a while, but he's obviously okay with it now. Well, he was okay, just didn't want to say his permission. And Sheza took me in immediately. He was like, and I just remember exactly, he's like, get in the car and pack up your things and leave. And then a lot helped me pack up my car. And I just remember, and I drove from Texas to Florida over like a course of 3 days because I had to stop a lot. I was with a 5-month-old and a year-old baby. So I took 3 days to travel, but I just remember going in, you know, across the Texas-Louisiana border, and I felt like I crossed into a new country. You know, there was something where I felt like I'm safe, you know?
Right. It's just like crossing that line. I remember like getting that text or that call, and just like all of us, you know, monitoring your arrival and your, you know, ultimately your survivor story. Right.
And I had never in my life, you know, and then I arrived into Florida, and I never in my life received charity. And that's literally what happened. Like, Arthur and his organization actually helped me. And it was a very humbling experience because I was truly in need, you know? And, you know, just to summarize, then from there, I knew this time was different because a lot of victims go back over and over and over again because they're so manipulated, and they always convince them, I'm going to change, I promise you I'm going to get help, but they never do. And so victims are constantly going back, but this time was different. This time I left for good.
Yeah, and it's just looking back, just thinking about some of the images that you asked prior for me to share, to save, right?
Yeah.
Because you knew what you had to do, but you weren't ready. Mm-hmm. And just having that on my phone, just pictures of the harm done to you. And a lot of it's not just physical, but emotionally. And I know that you talk a lot to that, and we'll get to that, but something, you know, I want to share a little bit is, you know, a lot of times you give me so much undeserving credit for being there for you, but I don't think I've ever.
That's not true.
I don't think this is probably, first live or video recorded where, you know, I'm going to talk about me being a survivor. And I think, you know, Lisa, you were that person for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and going through it together and just knowing that I think sometimes that we are known to be like strong people to our support systems. And so that sense of vulnerability, sense of people believing you. And I think you were that for me, and reaffirmed that what I went through was real, because you question yourself. And that's a big part of the abuse. Like, did this really happen?
They make you feel like you caused them to act that way. You're crazy. They get a lot of other people to support them and making you the bad person. I remember when I was living in New Mexico with he was my husband then, and I remember you texting me, and we were chatting, and I was like, "Is everything okay?" I sensed something was off because I was going through it, and you were telling me, you're like, "Well, we're having just some problems," but it was the way you were saying it. I knew there was something deeper.
Yeah. And, you know, you and alhamdulillah, my family and the women at the Muslim Women's Organization, we didn't have a program in place just yet. And I was working at the Arab American Community Center developing this DV program there. So like the sisterhood is deep, and I'm so forever grateful. And I also like am in contact with so many imams, right? Like so many people don't have the privilege of being so connected. And I remember I kept running into issues, these barriers. And
you're like, if you have these connections,
that's what I'm saying.
You're gonna say, yeah, because I feel
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm like literally like I feel
like, you know what I'm thinking. Like if I'm experiencing these barriers, what about women
that don't have these privileges,
that don't have these relationships, that are here on their own, like don't have family, don't have friends, don't have the organizational, don't have these connections to masajid? What are they doing? And for me, that's what was a take-home message. Like, I'm experiencing these barriers and struggled. What does that mean? So what barriers are you facing? And I know if you can talk that you face and talk to that, and how you're able to help break down these barriers, because that's something that Isra and Sadaf at the Muslim Women Organization and the violence against women, that's what they're working towards. You know, sometimes, like you said, like I look at you and I'm like, she's so strong, Michelle. Like, it's not easy for me to talk publicly, and you know, and it looks different for everyone. And I just want to say, like, I pray like for your peace and protection always, and including all survivors, even ones that are still haven't been able to share their stories and are still, you know, obviously the ones going through it. So if you can speak to the barriers that you face and how it's now you're helping break down so many sisters and you know, obviously brothers and other folks that are dealing with domestic violence.
God, what barrier? It's like, where do I start for barriers for victims of abuse? I feel like there could be a book on, you know, what we face. I would say one, the legal system. It works against us. Like, they act as if like you walk into the courtroom and as if you've been documenting every single piece of abuse since you started, like as if you were planning to go into court against this person. They make it where you're not allowed to record in the state of Florida, for instance. If I could just record him, I'd be able to prove easily all of the things that, you know, he's done, but you can't even do that. Or even so I think the legal system works against us. I think
I know, because especially in Florida, and they can't recognize even with documentation beforehand, just how if a woman is a survivor, and it's an easy like lookup, right? And just how they're not even centered at the legal system. And many times even like we had this discussion the other day, is like the Black and brown communities, women are not only more subjected to this violence, but when it comes to reporting it or finding support, many times they're shut down, and sometimes they're the ones that are arrested or detained, or reports are filed on them. And it's just
it's like they do all the time. They'll call the cops
violent. Yeah. And it's like, not only are you struggling to survive, but now you're being accused of being
the actual perpetrator.
Right. So not only you're worried about one person people not believing you, they've completely flipped the script.
I know a sister who, I'll keep her, details private. She's out, but he did the same thing. He called the cops on her. It's a very common tactic that abusers do, that they'll actually try to get you in trouble. So you're facing and just trying to prove your case. You know what I mean? It's like, you shouldn't have to fight for people to believe you.
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter that he was abusive to his first wife and then he has an abusive past. It's like, none of that matters. People should believe you, like, so that's another barrier. I would say, going on that, as far as believing women, is that a tactic that abusers do is they try to get an army of people against you, whether it's their family or friends. They try to make you out to be the crazy one. So going on, like how we were talking about that, but breaking down barriers, and what I'm hoping to do is, I think when I initially spoke out, I didn't have I shouldn't say intention, because my intention is absolutely to help, but I didn't realize to the extent that I would get involved. I just felt like I had to speak my truth. And I felt that if I had gone through this, that I knew other women were going through it. But I didn't realize to the extent of how many women were actually facing abuse. And then, subhanAllah, after every single survivor I heard from, every story is the same. It's like, it might have been played out differently, but they all, like, narcissistic abusers all have the same
manipulation, the gaslighting, the deflection, and how
intimidation, like,
internalized.
What I want people to realize is, no one wants to be right here or in your position. No one wants to. If people don't think that I don't hear from my ex nearly every time I do a live, they're blind. I am constantly threatened. He's going to take me to court. Defamation. They want to see you fail at any cost. And
it's like revenge. It's like,
they don't want to see you thrive. It doesn't matter that I've never said his name. It doesn't matter that I've never smeared him. It doesn't matter that I'm looking out for revenge. I'm not. I found that doesn't hurt me anymore when he threatens that, because for defamation, it has to be false of what I'm saying. And he knows it's true, So that's why I'm going to keep speaking out, because I don't do it to hurt him. He had those actions, you know what I mean? I'm not talking bad about him. I'm just telling the truth as to what happened. There's a huge difference. And so I'm going to keep speaking out, because I believe that the more we speak out on this and bring awareness to it, the more we can create change.
Again, just take at any moment that we need to take time, and I encourage, our viewers the same. This is the reality, I think, that so many are facing. And I remember, as soon as we went into social distance mode, what this would mean for those people that are quarantined with an abusive spouse. And we saw the disparities and inequities in all of these marginalized communities, including survivors. It's only amplified, it's only increased. So you've been doing this work for a while, but it's such an imperative time right now, considering the state of the world, and the accessibility is even further reduced, and it's like the resources are becoming less limited, or more limited, excuse me, and the abuse has intensified, right? Because you can imagine finance, the mental health, just that. I think that just knowing that you're out there, Lisa, and the burden shouldn't be from on survivors, but I understand that that's a reality. We do have a question from Facebook, and I just want to give a shout out to our executive director, who is working nonstop in all the programs, that's helping me get some of the questions. Do the men try to use Islam to justify the violence?
I don't think they use Islam to justify the violence, because I feel like if they're an abuser, it doesn't matter what religion they are. They're going to use whatever they can to intimidate you and to find abuse is power and control. They're going to do whatever they can to use it. I've heard over and over again, like, I'm in the middle of finally going to get child support the first time, and he tells me he'll see me on Judgment Day. And I'm like, for paying for your kids? So like they will try to use the religion to I'm at a loss for words right now.
Manipulate any religion.
They'll manipulate, exactly. No matter whatever tool they have in front of them, they're going to manipulate.
An abuser will use God's most precious creations as tools to abuse. And have men tried to misdirect and falsify Islam to justify? Absolutely. We see it in Christianity, we see it in Judaism, we see people that are not practicing faith, that they will use it to justify their abuse. It's horrendous and outrageous and outlandish, and just another tool in this toolbox of how to further, like you said, control and break down the spirits of women, really, and are survivors. And it just for a person to feel disenchanted, to feel disengaged, to feel less than, is all part of it. So of course, we've seen how Islam was misused to further break down that person,
to use it to go for power and control over you. Obviously I work with Muslim Aid USA, and we're doing a huge campaign.
Great work.
I'm so thankful for their organization. We did a webinar with Isha Prime, and they were talking about this very topic, about we need to educate that this is not Islam. And I don't necessarily think it's about education, because you can give them whatever hadith you want. They're going to choose to misinterpret whatever they want. And she said something that's so true. She's like, it's an issue of the heart. This is an issue of who they are as a person, it has nothing to do with how much education you give them, or how many hadiths you tell them, or how much you tell them that this is not an Islam. It's an issue with them and their heart. So that's my answer to that.
Just like everything that you've said tonight. Lisa, what do you find the hardest when doing this work? What is it that really is hard? Really, sometimes, there's moments where we're fired up and we know why we're doing it, and then there's moments when it's just why am I doing this? And to follow up with that question, how do you encourage others to deal with those obstacles, whether survivor or or advocate, and what have you found most useful when facing that kind of challenge?
I would say one of the hardest things doing this work is feeling like overwhelmed. You're like, there's such a big problem. Am I even helping? You know, it's like you almost feel defeated before you start sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 3 women, just like 1/3 of the women in the world have been affected by this. Like, that's an astronomical amount of people that are affected by abuse. So in some way, it's like you feel defeated before you even start because the problem's so big.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't let that stop me. I'm like, if I can help 1, 2, 3, however many women, that even if it means that they see that they saw me get out and survive, if that's what helps them, whether it's working directly with Muslim Aid USA, like whether it's directly helping to fund, or if it's, creating awareness, and or just being hopefully an example to say you can get out and you can survive. If I can help like 1 person, like that's enough for me. So that's what keeps me going. And I missed all the follow-up questions there.
No, I think what you're saying is you're being able to, like, subhanallah, you've literally taken the challenge, understood that it's a grievance for you, but somehow have been able to translate that as the mercy of it, right? Like, you are faced with a challenge of feeling that this is too big to dismantle, but have been able to further dig deeper into it and be like, well, 1 person surviving this is 1 more person surviving, right? So no, absolutely. It's just so much. And even as people, like, folks in the community, I one time got a text message from someone I had never met. And it was like 3:00 in the morning, and just, you don't know who I am, sis, but I heard you can help me. And I just remember being able to understand that, like, what sometimes support is, right? And what is it that person needs, and not always reacting, but just there to listen on the call with this person that I've never interacted with, never met, and just being there. And then what was so scary is he kept disconnecting the Wi-Fi to where the phone would cut off. It's like 3:00 in the morning. He's upstairs, she's downstairs. And I just remember, like,
you're like, how do you help? And that's one of the challenges, is that you want to help everybody, but you can't directly help everybody, and it's really difficult because, like, I'll get messages from people all the time and I have to refer them to their local services. And it's like, you can only do so much as 1 person, right? So that's for me, that's another challenge, that it's like when you get those calls and texts, you can only do so much as 1 person. That's why this needs to be a community effort to try to tackle this.
Community led, like, this is what we're all in together. And obviously making sure, if you are doing this work, that you are receiving the proper training. I know at the Muslim Women's Organization, we've received heart training and different kinds of training, just so that we're resource based, not even as advocates specifically, but understanding that sometimes people in the community do get these calls. I do want to read this comment from Facebook, and I want you to, like, take it in and hold that, Lisa, and just know that this is how we all feel. It's from Sister Rafia. She says, yes, in caps lock. Yes, you are helping. You have no idea. We can't change the world, Lisa, but you can change 1 person's world. Allah is guiding you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah. And I think it's important to know that, like, if there's anything that we can do to, like, how do you think what's the best way? Obviously, we have organizations, we have advocates, there are those resources out there, but what is a way that a sister just listening can help support?
Well, we have the direct campaign going on right now. Mashallah, it's actually helping, survivors. We are working with Kala Latif on Pillars of Peace. Muslim Aid USA's campaign is we're helping to support their safe space for women. I utilized a safe space before. I went with my 2 boys, and I know the strength it takes to leave and be in a space like that. So if we can create a safe space for these women where it's a Muslim-led safe space, but it's open to all women and children, like we're literally saving lives. Then the campaign's also directly helping victims of abuse in Somalia with vital services like legal aid, counseling, everything that goes into helping to rebuild someone's life. That's one way. Another way is to speak out. We can't, we've been brushing this under the rug, and we try I feel like as a Muslim community, we care more about like what we look like than if we are actually following the principles of Islam, right? We just like to look good, okay? So that's why everyone needs to be quiet. We don't want to talk about the abuse in the family, so everyone just wants to keep it quiet. I think if we can break through that barrier and not be afraid to speak out and not be afraid to stand up against the perpetrators, that's one thing how they think it can help. Another really important way to help is if you are in contact with a victim, they need a listening ear. They need help finding resources. They need help navigating through the legal system. Like there's so much that goes into helping to rebuild someone's life. So be that supportive sister or supportive brother to help the victim that just left, because it takes so much to rebuild your life after abuse.
I have a couple more questions, but we want to be protective of your time. And I think you absolutely hit it on the nail when you use the word rebuild, because while physical harm sometimes is life damaging, or but sometimes the emotional abuse, and when we talk about how we perform in the workplace or how we perform in school, or if they're getting an education, or if they're a mother or a family member, a friend, is how they show up in community is impacted, right? It impacts their interactions, it impacts how they process everything in front of them. So to rebuild that is, like you said, is just beyond a safe haven. Mm-hmm. It's how to literally rebuild that, they've gotten that courage, but rebuilding that confidence. I know you want to say something, so go ahead.
I was just going to say that's actually the hardest part about the journey, is that once you've made that decision to leave, it's actually that's the hardest part about making sure you don't go back. Like even after our divorce, like I even considered going back over and over and over again. And that's one thing that they need, supportive people around them to be like, don't go back, he's not going to change. They need that support. So it's like, but yes, rebuilding your life, it's like you've gone through so much trauma that it's like you don't even know how to get out of bed, let alone now you have to find a new home. Now you got to figure out, like I was an at-home mom for 3.5 years and I gave up everything. I can imagine for mothers that were at-home moms for 10, 15 years, like imagine all of a sudden having to go back into the workforce. I felt it was like a huge adjustment, going from like being this career woman to, an at-home mom. Even 3.5 years was kind of like, I have to get back into it. It was an adjustment. And then you've gone through all the trauma, and then they're usually still harassing you. Like I don't know one case where they just are leaving their victim alone, right? So they're having to rebuild their entire lives while they're still dealing with their abuser. So
yeah. So this is a, interesting question from everyone on Facebook. We appreciate. Thank you again for tuning in, listening, and really leaning in. And to the survivors out there, we hear you, we see you, and we're here for you. This is interesting just because I've seen so many people be creative with how they get imams to be a part of this process and how to be better advocates and not necessarily take on the role of a social worker, but to be trained on how to better receive this kind of information. And I've even heard of sisters ghostwriting imams khutbas on the importance of DV and how to show up, because just like any other arena or community, we're going to have members of clergy that can be problematic overtly or aren't trained to handle such a heavy issue. So this question, let me pull it up real quick, is can and should imams play a more significant role?
One, whether they can or should, I'm not really positive on the right answer, but they will be. So we have to face the facts that they're going to be a part of the process, because regardless if we think that they're the right person to go to, people will still continue to go to them. And then we're not going to change that. What we can do is help, like you said, we can give them the tools and resources on how to handle it when these victims come to them. So there's a really amazing organization, Peaceful Families. They're out of DC. They actually help train imams around the country on how to handle these situations. So they absolutely need to be trained, because whether we want them to be or whether they want to be, they're on the front lines and people are going to go to them first. We also have to remember as a community that they're imams and they are educated in religious studies. They're not a doctor, they're not a mental health therapist, they're sometimes they're a counselor, sometimes they're not. So we have to start recognizing that they don't specialize in everything. So if we have free resources available, like, mental health therapy, counseling, if those free resources are available, we should try to, not be afraid to utilize those, because they're human too, right? We think that the imam has this position of power and they should just know everything and should just know how to handle everything. No, they're humans. And I can't imagine what it's like being in their position and not knowing how to handle it, but yet they don't want to just leave the sister and she's left without any help. Right. Do the best that they can. So regardless, again, if they should or will be, they're going to be, whether we want them or not, whether they want to be or not. So we need to give them the tools and resources that it takes on how to handle this situation. Speaking of khutbas, I don't even think you knew this. With Muslim Aid USA, the campaign that we're doing, we've organized about 50 masjids joining in this Friday.
This Friday, mashallah. Wow, it's amazing. That's power. That's collective power.
Exactly what you're saying. We gave them the tools and resources. We said, here are some Islamic.
I didn't know this, by the way. We always align.
Yeah, I know. You can read my mind. We wrote up, and it was crafted by Khalid Latif and then Imam Majid out of Adams Center, as well as Peaceful Family Projects, who specialize in educating the imams on how to handle the situations. And they will be with the hadith and pointers and, just some topics to speak about in the khutbah. They're going to be speaking about it this Friday. So I'm hoping it can spark a conversation.
Well, we are at that time, but Lisa, with so much love for you. And
by the way,
thank you for being, there for me now in my first time publicly on, a virtual programming, sharing a little bit of my story, because it's a whole process, as you know. But we want to thank you so much at the Muslim Women's Organization and at the Violence Against Women committee at MWO for really taking the time out. We understand that this has been exhausting. People are still sending you love and comments on our live and saying that the fatigue is real, but we see you, we appreciate you. And if anyone has any more questions or concerns, please email beautiful group at the MWO at dv@mwo-orlando.org for the resources and support. If you're a survivor that needs help, please reach out. And like Isra said on the chat, that Heart is coming back in December to do more training. So definitely look out for that. So thank you to everyone who has tuned in. Our VAW task force, Sadaf and Isra and Lisa, Jazakallah khair, barakallah fiki. We're praying for Allah to continue to really build your resilience more than it already is, but also know that we are here to support you in this work. So barakallah fiki, Allah yahmiki. I want to give you the last minute or so to close us out, inshallah.
So one, thank you so much to the Muslim Women's Organization. You obviously, I am so thankful for you as a friend and someone I can always count on. You're the person that will I can text at 2 a.m. I'll get it. Yeah. If I need something. But if you're able to, please donate to the campaign. Alhamdulillah, we're almost at $100,000.
I see Sadaf sharing it. So inshallah folks on here are able to do that.
It's really simple, launchgood.com/db. So, if you can't donate, share the link. And please keep speaking out about this. And thank you to every single person that has supported the campaign and that is involved in fighting against domestic violence. So I appreciate you guys.
Assalamu alaikum.